Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Lecture 9, Poetry 1, Course Code 403. In the previous lecture, we discussed the Renaissance, the beginning of the Renaissance. Basically, it started from Italy, and there were a number of factors that gave rise to the development, to the beginning of this new learning. Renaissance refers to the revival, to the rebirth of learning. Now, this rebirth does not imply any previous death. So, it was the re-beginning, it was the rebirth without any previous death. So the factors that include that gave rise to the Renaissance, there were a number of them. First of all, there was a revolt against the established authority of the church, because the church had been too dogmatic in the previous centuries, and man was not free. It was the kind of belief that existed in the world was theocentric. Religion was the center of the universe. Now from that it shifted to anthropocentric. Anthropo means man, so the world became man-centered. Man gained importance. With the change in this concept, there were a number of other factors also that gave rise to Renaissance. There was the increased interest in human beings were given more importance as compared to religion, and man's self-consciousness was held responsible for right or wrong. So this was some important shift from the previously held authority of the church to the man's self-conscience. Moreover, there were new discoveries. There were discoveries of new worlds. There were discoveries. There were a number of people who were discovered new worlds around the world. There were some of the very famous names also, Vasco da Gama, Columbus, all these people. This was the era of the new discoveries. New worlds were discovered. Moreover, the Copernican system also brought a revolution in the perception of men. Earlier it was believed that it is the sun that moves around the earth. Copernicus, he published his paper, and in that he stated that it's not sun that moves around the earth, it is the earth which is restless and it moves around the sun, and man's importance is no more than an atom in this whole universe. This perception, this change brought a revolution in the social life of people. Another important factor was the fall of Constantinople. In 1453, the Turks captured Constantinople, and a number of Greek writers and philosophers, they fled from there and they took refuge in Italy. The fall of the Constantinople is not the only reason for the for Renaissance, because mistakenly some critics and some people, they attribute this only reason to the start of the Renaissance. Some of the Greek writers, they had earlier moved to Italy. They had moved to different parts of Italy and they had settled there. It brought a new learning. Basically, some of the people, they brought new learning to England also, some of the school masters. Now the perception of learning changed. They introduced the concepts of humanism in that. One of the important factor was the introduction of the classical writers, to be able to appreciate them and to translate them and to understand them. So this new learning was introduced into the school by a number of people, and initially it was not a very popular idea, but later on it became popular and it gained lots of appreciation. So humanism was introduced. Then we come to know about some of the notable writers of the age. We come to know about Sir Philip Sidney, Sir Thomas More. There were a number of other people also. Along with them, we came to know about Edmund Spenser also, because after Chaucer, he is considered to be one of the greatest poet in English literature. After Chaucer, Edmund Spenser is considered to be one of the greatest poets of English literature. He is one of the great Elizabethan poet. He introduced Spenserian stanza. It is named, since it was his innovation, so it is named after his name. One of his very famous work is The Faerie Queene. It is an epic, and he wrote The Faerie Queene in Spenserian stanza. Now, if we have a look at Spencer's style of poetry, we will be better able to understand his poem. So his poetry is supreme in its vision, and his vision is supreme in his poetry. He has an ultimate world of poetic fluency. He has ornate imagination, complex, something compound, linked to one another. उसने जो imagination उसमें use की है वो complex है, एक चीज दूसरे से link कर रही है, उसके underlying meanings भी हैं. उसने rich imagery का use किया है. Rich imagery refers to the use of the words and expressions जिससे हम एज रीडर्स इमेजिन कर सकते हैं कि वो किस चीज की बात कर रहा है. तो इतनी विविड डिस्क्रिप्शंस दी हैं. उसने लॉफ्टी आइडियलिज्म यूज किया है. उसका जो आइडियल है वो बहुत एलिवेटेड, उसको एक हाई पेडेस्टल पर उसने रखा है. ही इज अ सेंसुअस पोएट. सो ही इज अ पोएट हु अपील्स टू द सेंसेस ऑफ द रीडर. हमारे जो एस्थेटिक सेंसेस हैं, हमारे जो सेंस ऑफ सीइंग है, हियरिंग है, उसको अपील करती है पोइट्री. ही यूजेस लग्जूरियंट कलर्स. तो वो कलर्स की और सारी जो विविड डिस्क्रिप्शन है सीन्स की बहुत अच्छे तरीके से उसमें बताता है. ही हैज गॉट वर्बल म्यूजिक. हिज लैंग्वेज इज वेरी म्यूजिकल, वेरी मेलोडियस. तो उसमें वर्बल म्यूजिक है. He has blended romantic ideas, nationalistic feeling, and idealistic thought. So three of these things, they are very different from each other, but he has in his poetry he has combined three of the things together. So this is something ideal. He has experimented with language. He has enriched it by experimenting with it. He has used archaic expressions and allusions from mythology. Now, coming to the Fairy Queen once again, if we look at the plan that why he wrote the Fairy Queen, he wrote a letter to Sir Walter Raleigh which was published in 1590s edition. In that he clearly stated that the purpose of this book is to fashion a gentleman or a noble person in virtuous and gentle discipline. So he has clearly stated, there is no doubt about why he or what was the reason for writing the Fairy Queen. The general plan of the book was that there will be 12 books, and in each book there will be 12 cantos. Cantos are small parts, so each book will have 12 parts, and it was designed as a 12 days feast, and those feasts will be held by Gloriana, the queen of the fairyland. Now a stranger will appear each day. He would ask for the help and against some giant or a tyrant or a cruel person or a dragon. So it can be anyone, and he will be assigned a knight in order to be rescued from that tyrant or from that giant or dragon. In each book the adventure of one knight will be discussed. Now each knight, he will symbolize, since it is allegorical, so each knight will symbolize 12 virtues of Aristotle, and contrary to these 12 virtues there will be 12 vices also. And Prince Arthur is the central figure of the Fairy Queen, and the ideal knight here he symbolizes the magnificence. And it is also believed that by saying Prince Arthur, Spencer wanted to refer to Earl of Leicester. In allegory, the poems, the works are symbolic of different things. It can be at different levels. It can be the religious one, it can be the moral, it can be the political or historical also. So he has not, when we talk about the historical or political allegory, he has referred to the Queen as well as the Earl of Leicester, because he was one of his great patrons. He was his guide who motivated him, who encouraged him to write. The general plan of the book was that it was an allegory of virtues and vices. It was an allegory of the times and people. It was a story of romance and adventure, and character and actions have got double meanings in it. And basically it was planned that there will be 12 books, but only 6 of the books were completed, and book 7 is unfinished, that is incomplete. The allegory, as we discussed earlier also, that allegory is an extended metaphor. मेटाफर में हम सिर्फ एक चीज को दूसरी की कैरेक्टरिस्टिक्स एट्रीब्यूट कर देते हैं. अगर हम कहें कि शी इज a rose. So that does not mean कि she has become a rose, कि वो फूल बन गई है. That means she has the qualities of a rose. Now what are the most prominent qualities of a rose? Beauty, उसकी जो नाजुकी, the elegance. So that is basically given to the girl. In extended, so in this case, in the case of metaphor, हमने सिर्फ एक क्वालिटी एट्रीब्यूट की है, लेकिन एलेगरी में तमाम स्टोरी में जो भी कैरेक्टर्स या जो भी एक्शंस हैं, हर चीज किसी चीज और चीज को सिंबलाइज करती है, किसी और चीज को रेफर करती है. तो ये एक बड़े पैमाने पर एक मेटाफर हुआ जिसमें हर चीज सिंबॉलिक है किसी चीज के लिए. तो एक इस तरह से इसमें मेटाफर में दो मीनिंग्स होते हैं एक वर्ड के. यहाँ पर दो मीनिंग्स नहीं है, दो स्टोरीज हैं, क्योंकि वो एक्सटेंडेड मेटाफर है, वो एक बहुत बड़े पैमाने पर पूरी स्टोरी के लेवल पर वो मेटाफर है. तो एक स्टोरी वो है जो अपेरेंट लेवल पर हमें बताई जा रही होगी कि एक नाइट है, उसने किसी की हेल्प कैसे की है, लेकिन वो नाइट किसको सिंबलाइज कर रहा है, रिलीजियसली या पॉलिटिकली या मॉरली, दैट इज एलेगरी. एंड three types of allegory have been used, as we discussed earlier also, that moral allegory, there is religious allegory, and there is political historical allegory. तो हर incident, हर character allegory में जो है represent करता है किसी virtue को, किसी vice को, किसी political या historical figure को. So this was all about allegory. Now, if we talk about Spenser's language, his as we talked earlier, that he uses archaic language. He was very fond of using archaic language. So otherwise, language does not appear that archaic. But there is a guide also. There is some help also. If we concentrate the type of spellings he uses, if we replace you with we will find that those words are not very difficult to read, and they would become the modern English equivalents. For example, if Chaucer uses the word like G-I-U-E, and if we replace this U with V everywhere, we will find that this would become the modern English equivalent, as in the case of the example that I gave you, G-I-U-E, this is give. Similarly, if we replace I with J, for example, the word like object, O-B-I-E-C-T, it appears very strange to the eyes, but if we replace I with J, it becomes O-B-J-E-C-T. So that is the modern English equivalent of object. Similarly, if we replace Y with I, in the case of the word like English, E-N-G-L-Y-S-H-E, now E-N-G-L-I-S-H, so once again, it becomes the modern English equivalent. Finally, there are a number of places, there is an extra E added to the words. If we remove that E, it would become the modern English equivalent. So this is a guide, this is a hint to understand Spenser's language. Now, before starting with the Fairy Queen, in the story we have George, the knight. These are the characters of the story. Then we have Lady Una. The knight slays the dragon and recovers the castle of Lady Una's father. This is the whole story. And allegory is that the Red Cross Knight is Saint George. He is the champion of Christian holiness, and he is the representative of the Anglican Church. And Una represents truth, and she is representative of the true religion also. And dragon refers to the error. Now this is the title, the first title given to it. The first book of the Fairy Queen, containing the legend of the Knight of the Red Cross or of Holiness. Book B-O-O-K-E. So again, if we implement those guide to the spellings, Chaucer's spellings, we will find that they are helpful here. That in the case of the word queen, Q-V-E-E-N-E, this is queen, Q-U-E-E-N-E. So even the final E should be removed, so it should be queen. So that helps, really helps a lot. So I've taken this first stanza in order to analyze the pattern of the poem, that how does he write. So first of all, it is a 9-line, he uses a 9 lines long stanza. This is known as Spenserian stanza. Moreover, if we look at the last words of these lines, the first word is mask and the next word is weeds. Mask, if we try to find out the rhyme scheme of these lines, अब mask जो है वो weed से rhyme नहीं करता है, तो mask को अगर हम एक small letter of alphabet अगर attribute करें तो mask will be A. Okay, weeds does not rhyme with mask, so it will be B. Task, now task and mask, they rhyme together, so the same letter should be attributed to the sounds that are similar. Mask को हमने अगर A कहा था, so this task will also be A. Similarly, the next is reeds. Now weeds and reeds, that rhymes together, so this should be B. So far the rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B. And that is why I have used these different colors also to refer to the similar sounds. Then we have deeds. Deeds once again rhymes with reeds, so again this should be B. Long is a word that does not rhyme with mask, it neither rhymes with weeds, so it does not rhyme with any of the words that have come earlier, so it should have a new letter of alphabet. So here long should have the third letter of alphabet, that would be C. Now reeds, deeds and reeds, these two rhyme together, so it should be B. The next is throng. Throng and long, yes, it rhymes together, so it should be once again C. The next one is, the last one is song. Long and song, yes, it rhymes together, so again C. So the rhyme scheme is A, B, A, B, B, C, B, C, C. So this is the rhyme scheme of Spenser's stanzas. He has written it in Spenserian stanza. Spenserian stanza में लिखा है, इसकी rhyme scheme जो है वो, इसके हर stanza में 9 लाइनें हैं और हर stanza है उसकी rhyme scheme A, B, A, B, B, C, B, C, C. If we have a look at the layout, he has written it in Spenserian stanza. Each stanza consists of 9 lines. First 8 lines are written in iambic pentameter. I repeat once again, iambic pentameter is a meter in which there are 5 feet, the first unstressed and the second stressed. Feet refers to the pair of syllables. So there are 10 syllables in iambic pentameter, and the pattern is the first is unstressed and the second syllable is stressed, and there are 5 feet. Now back to the Spenserian stanza. In Spenserian stanza there are 9 lines. The first 8 lines are written in iambic pentameter, and the 9th line is written in Alexandrine. Now why it is called Alexandrine? Because it has 12 syllables. In iambic pentameter there are 10 syllables, उसमें 10 syllable हैं, और जो Alexandrine है, Alexandrine में 12 syllable हैं, so 2 syllables का इजाफा हो गया है. So comparatively इस Spenserian stanza में 8 लाइनों की जो लेंथ है वो मोर और लेस बराबर होगी, क्योंकि उसमें 10-10 सिलेबल हैं, वो सब आयाम्बिक पेंटामीटर में लिखी गई हैं. लेकिन जो आखिरी लाइन है दैट इज डिफरेंट, दैट इज अ बिट लॉन्गर, वो बाकी लाइनों से थोड़ी सी लंबी है क्योंकि उसमें 12 सिलेबल हैं. एंड द राइम स्कीम इज ए बी बी सी सी. So this was the rhyme scheme. Now another thing, that not only that the last line is written in Alexandrine, it serves a particular purpose also. The last line is always a concluding one. This is a very important line also. So now we begin with the text of the Fairy Queen, Book 1, Canto 1. And in this course, Book 1, from Fairy Queen, Book 1, only Canto 1 is included. And it consists of 54 stanzas. And before that, there is an invocation to the muse that consists of 4 more stanzas. Lo, I the man. Lo, it says, look, the poet addresses his readers. He says that I the man whose muse is the goddess. Whilom did mask, that whose muse, whose goddess had disguised herself as time had taught is lowly shepherd's weeds. Weeds is the clothes. So she had her, he says that basically shepherd's weeds, weeds is the dress, shepherd is a person, जैसे चरवाहा होता है. And now basically this is a reference to his earlier poems that he had earlier written, Shepherd's Calendar. When we talked about his important works, notable works of the writer of Edmund Spenser, we discussed that he had written the Shepherd's Calendar, and that was a pastoral poetry. So he says that I am the one, he addresses the reader and he tells the reader that I am the one who had written that Shepherd's Calendar. He gives a reference of that I am the one who has written pastoral poetry, and my muse had masked herself, had disguised herself as in the shepherd's dress. And now he mentions clearly that I am the one whose muse had disguised herself in shepherd's clothes. So he refers to his earlier writing that he had written the Shepherd's Calendar. So he says that I have earlier written pastoral poetry, am now enforced a far unfitter task. So he says that I undertake a task, I have taken to go for writing something for which I am unfit. For trumpets stern to change mine oaten reeds. Oaten reed is the musical instrument of the shepherds, he said, and instead of these oaten reeds, he says that I wish to replace this oaten reed with the trumpets, because oaten reed is the musical instrument for the shepherds, वो चरवाहों का है, लेकिन उसके बरक्स जो ट्रम्पेट है वो यूज किया जाता है नाइट्स की और जो ब्रेव सोल्जर्स हैं उनकी ग्लोरी की दास्तान सुनाने के लिए. तो वो कह रहे हैं कि क्योंकि मैंने पहले जो है पेस्टरल पोइट्री लिखी है जो कि चरवाहों के मुतालिक थी, तो अब मैं अपने आप को मैं एक ऐसी चीज के मुतालिक लिखना चाहता हूं कि जिसके लिए मैं अपने आप को बहुत अनफिट कंसिडर करता हूं. I intend to replace the autumn reed with the trumpets and sing of knights and ladies' gentle deeds. And what he wanted to do, he wanted to discuss the brave deeds, the exploits, the heroic qualities of the knights and ladies. So he says that I want to talk about something very great, something elevated, something that has got the highest pedestal. तो वो उस चीज की बात करना चाहता है. अब पहले उसने शेफर्ड्स के बारे में लिखी है पोइट्री, अब वो आम लोगों के बारे में लिखी है. नाउ ही अंडरटेक्स दिस मिशन. ही सेज दैट आई इंटेंड टू चेंज दैट. And he wants to talk about the heroic qualities of soldiers. He wants to talk about the noble ladies who have been very brave and who had done something in the history, whose prayers having slept in silence long. Now he says that whose prayers, that nobody has praised their great deeds, their exploits, they were extraordinary, लेकिन किसी ने भी उनकी तारीफ नहीं की है. Having slept in silence long, that it had been such a silence for such a long time that nobody had talked about it. Me, all too mean, the sacred muse reads, that the muse, the holy muse, advises me, supports me to blazon road amongst her learned throng, to talk about these stories. Fierce wars and faithful loves shall moralize my song. So he says that she has advised me, she has supported me to talk about such things, to talk about the exploits, about the heroic deeds, about the heroic qualities of soldiers and ladies. And so my song, my poetry will be concerned with the fierce war. So it will include the fierce wars and faithful love. So these two things will be the subject matter. So this will be the theme of my poetry. Help then. So he is seeking help. O Virgin Chief of Nine. O Holy Virgin Chief of Nine. Help then, Holy Virgin Chief of Nine. So here basically he asks for help. He asks the muse. Virgin is a reference to Clio, who is the muse of history, and she is the chief of all these. So this is a reference to the Greek mythology. Thy weaker noise to perform thy will. So this is your will. You have advised me. You have asked me to write this sort of poetry, to talk about the heroic deeds of the kings and knights and soldiers and ladies. So I have undertaken this task. So thy weaker noise, I am a weak, a humble fellow. Lay forth out of thine everlasting screen. Screen is the writing desk. So now he is taking help. He wants to take help from her writing desk. He says that I am the weaker one. I want to seek that help. The antique rolls. Antique rolls, this is a reference to the history. He says that which there lie hidden still. So those from the history, the part of the history which lies hidden from the world, I want to seek your help out of that part of the history of fairy knights and fairest Tanaquil. So he says that he wants to seek help, and he wants to know about all those parts of the history which have not been talked about, where about the fair knights and about the noble queens, whom that most noble Briton prince so long sought through the world and suffered so much ill, that I must row his undeserved wrong. O help thou my weak wit and sharpen my dull tongue. Here it is a reference to Prince Arthur. He says that Prince Arthur, he went round the world and he suffered so much for you that he and the fate, the ill fate that he received, he did not deserve that, and he says that I will talk about it. Oh help thou. He is invoking the muse. He wants to take help. In poetry, the exact term for seeking help from some goddess is known as the invocation. So he invokes the muse. He wants to seek help from the muse for his wit. He wants to have knowledge. He wants to have that courage, because he says that my wit is dull. He says that I don't have that caliber. My stamina is, I don't have that type of stamina, and I don't know those parts of history about which people have not talked. So he says, oh help thou my weak wit. Wit is mind, that my mind is weak, my understanding is weak. Do help me, and sharpen my dull tongue. Tongue refers to the speech. So, and sharpen my dull speech. I do not know how to talk about it. He is invoking the muse. He wants to seek help. This is a tradition in writing poetry, that whenever poets want to write about some exploits of the heroes, of soldiers, they want to write about the great deeds, about wars, they invoke the help of the muse. They seek help from the muses. And thou most dreaded imp of highest Jove. Imp is the child, offspring. So dreaded is most people are afraid of. So highest Jove. Jove is a reference to Venus and Jove, whose son is Cupid. Fair Venus' son. That imp is the offspring. That he says that you, Cupid, the son of Jove and Venus, that with thy cruel dart, that with the dart of the Cupid, it is believed that Greek mythology में ये consider किया जाता है कि Cupid जिसको arrow से hit करे, that person falls in love. तो इसके basis पर the poet uses that reference कि Cupid के Jove और Venus का son Cupid जो है, with that with thy cruel dart, कि उसने अपने cruel arrow के साथ, at that good night so cunningly didst row, that he hit him so cruelly that glorious fire it kindled in his heart. That it did not actually hit the persons. It is believed that he fell in love, because since that arrow hit him, he fell in love. Lay now thy deadly Heben bow apart. Heben is the ebony of the ebony wood which is used for making arrows. He says that it is with that arrow that you very cleverly, very cunningly, you aimed it at the knight, at that good, kind-hearted knight, and he was a victim of it. That this glorious fire, it started in his heart, and that was the fire of love. And with thy mother mild, come to mine aid. Aid is help. Thy mother, your mother. So his mother is Venus, who is the goddess of beauty. And he says that not only he asks Cupid, he refers to him, then he says that with thy mother and also your mother. Cupid, the god of love, and Venus, the goddess of mother. So these are the references from the Greek mythology. He says that with your mother, come to my help, come both, and with you bring triumphant Mart. Mart is Mars, the Roman god of war. So he is calling Cupid for help, and he says that come with your mother, who is kind because she is the goddess of beauty. So he calls Cupid Venus, and he says that bring with you Mart also, triumphant Mart, victorious, who is victorious all the time, in love and gentle Aeolites arrayed. And Mart is the god of war, but he says that bring him with you when he is in a gentle mood, when he is in a mood of love and happiness, after his murderous spoils and bloody rage allayed. Allayed means decreased. That bring him in a very good, kind and gentle mood with you, after he has decreased, after he has finished his murderous urge and his bloody anger. So after he has had fulfilled his desire for bloodshed and for cruelty, bring him with you in a nice and pleasant mood. And with them eke is also, and with them also, O goddess heavenly bright, O goddess heavenly bright, mirror of grace and majesty divine. Here it is said that this is a reference to the Queen of England. This is a reference to Queen Elizabeth, that O goddess heavenly bright, that you, the heavenly goddess, mirror of grace. She is symbolic of what? Grace and majesty, divine majesty. Great lady of the greatest isle. So once again, she is the greatest of all the ladies. She is the Queen Elizabeth. So she is the greatest, and the greatest isle. Once again, the patriotic touch, that patriotic note is found in the poetry of the greatest isle, the Great Britain, whose light like Phoebus' lamp throughout the world doth shine. Shed thy fair beams into my feeble eyne. So he says that, oh, great lady of the greatest isle, it is a reference to Queen Elizabeth. He invokes her, that Queen, you from the Great Britain, whose light, and your light, Phoebus is Phoebus' lamp. Phoebus is the god of sun. So he says that your light, like that of the light of the sun, it shines throughout the world. It is everywhere. He says that you, he calls Cupid, he calls Venus, Mars and Queen Elizabeth to come and spread their light into his feeble is weak, into his weak eyes, so that he can write poetry, so that he can undertake this mission that he has started. As he wanted to write the poetry, as he wanted to write about the greatest deeds of the heroes, the exploits of the heroes, the exploits of the warriors and the soldiers. And raise my thoughts too humble and too vile. He says that, and give strength, give elevation to my thinking, which is too humble and low, which is too weak and too vile, and to think of that true glorious type of thine, so that I think of your glorious type, the argument of mine afflicted style, that the argument is the lowly, is the subject, that he is writing, and his low pen, his humble pen could write, to the which to hear vouchsafe, oh dear, oh dearest dread a while. So they should be pleased to hear that, to hear him, because he says that not only my wit, not only my pen and my thinking is weak, he says that my writing style, my pen is also weak. I cannot undertake this task. So in all these stanzas, he is taking help from different, there are different allusions, there are different references from the mythology and from the Greek and Roman mythology, and he seeks help not only from mythology, from Roman and Greek mythology, he also seeks help from the Queen Elizabeth. He refers to her, and he asks her to come for his help and to give him strength to undertake such an extraordinary task. From here the canto 1 begins. The patron of true holiness. Who is the patron of holiness? The Red Cross Knight. Foul error doth defeat. Error is falsehood. Hypocrisy him to entrap, doth to his home entreat. Hypocrisy is represented by Archimago. So this very first 4 lines in the form of a stanza, it clearly announces the whole story, that the true holiness defeats error, and hypocrisy is also entrapped, and they both have to retreat in their home. So here it's the first stanza. We begin with the first stanza. Gentle knight was pricking on the plain, yea clad in mighty arms and silver shield, wherein old dints of deep wounds did remain, the cruel marks of many a bloody field, yet arms till that time did he never wield. So gentle knight, so there was a knight, it is a reference to the Red Cross Knight, as we had just read in those 4 lines, that the knight in this canto 1, book 1 is the Red Cross Knight, and he represents holiness. He was pricking, he was riding by, जब घोड़सवार जब चलाते हैं तो उनके पाँव में एक स्पर लगा होता है जिससे वो प्रिक करते रहते हैं हॉर्स को ताकि वो चलता रहे. दिस इज अ टेक्निक फॉर हॉर्स राइडिंग. यू माइट बी नोइंग अबाउट इट. तो he was pricking on the plain, he was spurring the horse for riding, so he was slowly riding on the plain. Ye clad in mighty arms and silver shield. Ye clad is dressed, he was dressed in mighty arms, he was wearing he was dressed well in that dress of a soldier, and he was carrying a silver shield wherein old dents of deep wounds did remain. So, dents is the sign, so there were dents of deep wounds, the cruel marks of many a bloody field. So there were lots of marks of the field where he had fought, yet arms till that time did he never wield. So he had not worn these arms till that time. His angry steed did chide his foaming bit. So steed is the horse. So his horse was making a foam in its mouth, and as much disdaining to the curb to yield. So it appeared as if it wanted to chafe at the curb that it had to yield. Full jolly knight he seemed. So he appeared to be a very nice man, a very kind man, and fair did sit. And he sat on his horse very fairly, as one for knightly jests. So jest is the joust, a dispute between the 2 knights on horseback. So he was sitting as if he is sitting for a knightly joust. And fierce encounters fit. So his position was such as if he was ready to fight with somebody who is there in his for having a dispute or a quarrel. But on his breast a bloody cross he bore. So he had a On his breast he had a symbol of cross, the dear remembrance of dying Lord. So he had kept it as the remembrance of his Lord who is dead, for whose sweet sake that glorious badge he wore. So it was in remembrance of him that he was wearing that badge, and dead as living ever him adored. So he loved him as when he was living. He was a living being. So he loved him as if he is still living in this world. Upon his shield the like was also scored, for sovereign hope, which in his help he had, right faithful true he was in deed and word, but of his cheer did seem too solemn sad, yet nothing did he dread, but ever was ye dread. So on his shield the like was also scored. There was a mark on his shield also. And what was that mark? What was that symbolic of? For sovereign hope. He was in the hope of, he was in supreme hope that he has the help of his master, and that was the reason. It showed his hope, his expectation that since he is wearing that shield, so he will receive all the help and support of his master as when he could when he was living in this world. Right faithful true he was in his deed and word. So this is about the character of the knight, that he was very faithful, he was very sincere and loyal in the matters of whatever he said and whatever he did. Deed is his action, whatever he did, and word is his speech. So whatever he said or whatever he did, he was sincere, he was loyal, he was faithful in that. But of his cheer did seem too solemn sad, but his appearance, his expression, that appeared to be very serious, sad. Yet nothing did he dread. He was not afraid of anything, he did not fear anything, but ever was ye dread. He was dreaded by others. Others were afraid of him. He was never afraid of anyone, but others were afraid of him. Upon a great adventure he was bound. So he was on his way to a great adventure. The greatest Gloriana to him gave. The greatest Gloriana. So here, as we talked about this earlier also, that the plan of the book was that there will be a feast. Each state will be arranged by Queen Gloriana, who is the queen of the fairyland. And on the other hand, it can be, if we look at the political allegory, Gloriana may represent the Queen Elizabeth. That greatest glorious queen of fairyland, to win him worship and her grace to have, which of all earthly things he most did crave. So this was a task, this was the adventure assigned to him by Queen Gloriana, who was the queen of the fairyland, and she wanted to win worship. Here is honor. He wanted to bring honor and her grace to have, which of all earthly things he did most crave. So this was the only thing. Honor was the only thing. By getting success in that war, by getting success in that adventure, he wanted to gain that honor. And ever as he rode, so as he was riding, his heart did earn to prove his prowess in battle brave. Prowess is power. His heart proved to be very powerful in brave battles, in the battles that needed the acts of courage and bravery. Upon his foe, so he was very powerful, his heart was very strong against, his heart proved to be very strong and powerful against his foes, and his new foes to learn. Upon his foe, a dragon horrible and stern. So a dragon is basically a mythical monster like a crocodile. It is a huge monster. So this time he was going to learn something. He was going to get the experience of having a new force against a bitter enemy called dragon, who was very strong and very horrible. a lowly lady rode him fair beside. So besides him there was a fair lady upon a lowly ass more white than snow. So she was riding, there was a lovely lady. This lady is Una, Lady Una. She personifies truth, and she was riding on an ass. Ass is a donkey. She was riding on an ass, and since she was riding on the donkey, so it indicates, it represents her humility. More white than snow, and this ass was as white as snow, or rather it was more white than snow, yet she much whiter. It was more white than snow, but she was even whiter than the snow, than the ass. But the same did hide under a veil that wimpled was full low, and over all a black stole she did throw. So how she was riding? She was riding on an ass back, and the ass was more white than the snow, and she was even whiter than the ass, and but she hid that white color, she hid under a veil that she was wearing, and she had it full low, and overall a black stole, and she was wearing a black stole also with that wimple. She had a long robe, which is usually worn by the priest, a gown like thing, an overcoat. So she was wearing a black overcoat or a black gown also, but she had covered her face. She had a low wimple also, she was wearing that, and she had tried to hide her face behind that wimple. As one that inly mourned, and she appeared as if she was inwardly mourning for something, जैसे वो किसी चीज का मातम कर रही हो. So was she sad. She was so sad that it appeared that she is mourning for something, जैसे वो किसी चीज का मातम कर रही हो, किसी चीज के लिए गमज़दा गमगीन हो. And heavy sat upon her palfrey slow. Palfrey is the small horse. Heavy, that with that heavy heart sat upon her palfrey, which was riding very slowly, seemed in heart some hidden care she had. It seemed that she had got certain issue, some matter in her heart that she had not disclosed to anyone, and by her in a line a milk white lamb she had. So she also had a lamb whose color was milk white, and she was carrying the line, the robe of that lamb. So pure and innocent. Now the lamb refers to the innocence, and it was very pure. It was milk white. The color of lamb was milk white. So the first thing that refers to purity, that the color was milk white. So pure and innocent. Now we will have a sharp contrast later on, because later on we will talk about the dragon and the things related to the dragon. उसमें हमें एक sharp contrast पता चलेगा कि यहाँ पर अभी तक हम जिस चीज के बारे में भी बात कर रहे हैं, it's very pure, it's white. Lady Una, we talked about her ass, we talked about her lamb. Everything is whiter than snow or milk. So white color तो purity को represent करता है. तो we will have a sharp contrast later on. As that same lamb, she was in life and every virtuous lore, and by descent from royal lineage came of ancient kings and queens that had of yore their scepters stretched from east to western shore. So she had a lamb with her, which was as white as milk, and it was symbolic of purity. It was symbolic of innocence. It was symbolic for the purity and innocence of Lady Una also, that she how pure and innocent she has been in her life, and how virtuous she had been in all the disciplines of her life, and she has descended from the royal family, from a royal lineage, whose control was extended from east to the western shores, or who ruled all over the world. तो उनका जो वो उस रॉयल फैमिली से ताल्लुक रखती थी जिन्होंने मशरिक से लेकर मगरिब तक हुकूमत की थी. तो she was from such a noble family, and all the world in their subjection held. So they ruled over the world till that infernal fiend with foul uproar. So what happened? This royal family, they held their rule all over the world till the time that this dragon took the control, for wasted all their land. It caused destruction all over their land and them expelled the kings and queens and the people who were living in that castle, who were ruling over that place. तो जो लोग जो रॉयल फैमिली थी, ये पूरी दुनिया पे हुकूमत कर रही थी कि एक टाइम आया कि ड्रैगन आया, उसने इन सबको एक्सपेल कर दिया, वहां से निकाल दिया और उस सारी जगह को तबाह बर्बाद करके रख दिया और इन लोगों को वहां से बाहर निकाल दिया गया. Whom to avenge? Now after that what happened? Whom to avenge? She had this knight from far compelled. So she had requested, she had called for help in order to take the revenge of his parents, in order to get back that castle. She had asked for help, she had called for help to this knight. So this is basically the basic essence of this adventure, that where are they going or why Lady Una and this knight they are going, that the dragon has taken the control of the land of Lady Una or the castle of Lady Una's father. So the knight is going to take that castle back for her. Behind her far away a dwarf did lag. So behind her there was a dwarf also who did lag, who was coming slowly with them. That lazy seemed in being ever last. He was always the last one who was coming. So that showed his laziness. Or wearied with bearing of her bag. Bearing is carrying. So wearied is tired. So he seemed tired since he was carrying her bag of needments at his back, thus as they passed. This dwarf, he was always the last one. He looked to be lazy, or he was tired of carrying the Lady Una's bag, because that bag, he was holding that bag on her back, and it contained the necessities that Lady Una required. As they passed, so as they were passing, he was holding that bag on his back. The day with clouds was sudden overcast. As they were passing, the sky was overclouded, and an angry Jove as an hideous storm of rain. Angry Jove is the god of rain. So since the angry god, he sent a horrible storm, did pour into his lemon's lap so fast that every white so shrewd it did constrain, and this fair couple eke to shrewd themselves were fain. Lemons is the lady, the love's sweethearts. White is the creature, that everyone was the as they were passing, suddenly the sky became overcast, it was covered with the clouds, and the angry Jove sent a horrible storm with the rain, and the lady and everybody around was forced to take shelter, to look for shelter. So this fair couple also was forced to look for shelter for themselves, and forced to seek some court nay at hand. So they were also forced to look for some shelter around. A shady grove not far away they spied. So they could see a cave, a shady cave which was not very far from that place, that promised aid the tempest to withstand. So it seemed that they have gotten this help, that it was near there, and they could escape that rain and the thunderstorm and the storm and thunderstorm and all that. So that bad weather they could escape by taking refuge, by taking shelter into that cave. whose lofty trees, ye clad with summer's pride, did spread so broad that heaven's light did hide. So these trees, they were so thick and they were so extended in all sides that the light could not pass through these. So they were thickly covered, no pierceable with power of any star. So even the light, the dim light of the stars could not pass through them, and all within were paths and alleys wide. So there were a number of paths they could see. When they entered the cave, it was all thick, it was all dark, and they could see later on, after that, after entering that cave, they could see a number of paths. उन्हें बहुत ज़्यादा रास्ते उसमें नजर आ रहे थे. With footing worn, जो के जिसके ऊपर के बहुत ज्यादा लोगों ने चल चल के उसको एक रास्ता बना दिया हुआ था. एंड लीडिंग इनवर्ड फार, जो कि आगे एक और ही रास्तों की तरफ लेकर जा रहे थे. फेयर हार्बर दैट देम सीम्स, it appeared for them a good shelter. So in they entered air. So they entered in that place in order to take shelter. And forth they passed with pleasure forward led, joying to hear the birds' sweet harmony, which therein shrouded from the tempest dread, seemed in their song to scorn the cruel sky. Now what happened? As they went further, they went on some of the paths with pleasure forward led. So happily they were moving on that, joying to hear the birds' sweet harmony. So they were listening to the birds' songs, which therein shrouded. So it was sheltered from the tempest dread, seemed in their song to scorn the cruel sky. So it seemed as if, because of that bad weather also, these birds in their songs, they were also having a complaint towards the sky for it being cruel. Much can they praise the trees so straight and high. So they started praising the trees that were around. They started looking at the trees, the number of the type of trees that were around, and they started praising them. The sailing pine, with pine the sails are made, the sailing boats are made. So now it is a little bit of the description of the scene. Since they have entered that cave, एक केव लाइक थिंग है, लेकिन वहां पर वो केव जो है वो दरख्तों का बना हुआ है. इस कदर घने दरख्त हैं कि वो आसपास और कुछ भी नहीं देख सकते, उससे कोई रोशनी पास नहीं हो सकती है. तो दिस इज द डिस्क्रिप्शन ऑफ ऑल दोज ट्रीज. सो अ बिट ऑफ डाइग्रेशन इज देयर. पाइन है जिसमें के जिसको सेलिंग के लिए यूज किया जाता है, उसकी लकड़ी को सेल बनाने के लिए और बोट्स बनाने के लिए यूज किया. सिडार प्राउड एंड टॉल. सिडार जो ट्री है वो बहुत लंबा और स्ट्रेट है, उसके दे प्रेड इट. द वाइन क्रॉप एल्म. Elm जो है, again it is used for vine, for the supporting vine. The poplar never dry. Poplar is an evergreen tree जो कि कभी खुश्क नहीं होता है. The builder oak. Oak की लकड़ी जो है वो बिल्डिंग के तौर पे, for building purposes वो यूज होती है. Sole king of forests all. So this is, and it is also known as the king of all the forests. And the aspine good for states. The aspine good for states, the cypress funeral. So aspine is again the aspine good for states. It's the wood is used for forming sides of the cask. So एस्पाइन की लकड़ी जो है वो कैस्क के लिए यूज होती है. इसी तरह साइप्रस की लकड़ी जो है वो ताबूत बनाने के लिए इस्तेमाल होती है. तो जब ताबूत बनाने के लिए इस्तेमाल की जाती है तो उसको फ्यूनरल के साथ अफिलिएट किया जाता है. तो ही हैज गिवन द डिस्क्रिप्शन ऑफ ऑल द टाइप्स ऑफ ट्रीज दैट आर प्रेजेंट देयर. नाउ इट इज अ काइंड ऑफ डाइग्रेशन. वी हैव डाइग्रेस्ड फ्रॉम द मेन पॉइंट, क्योंकि मेन पॉइंट जो है उसमें ये लोग लेडी ऊना की हेल्प के लिए जा रहे थे. नाइट वॉज अराउंड. नाइट था, उसके साथ लेडी ऊना थी. लेडी ऊना के साथ एक डवाफ था, एक लैम थी. सो दे हैव डाइग्रेस्ड. दे वर ऑन देयर वे. देयर वाज अ स्टॉर्म. दे एंटर्ड अ केव. नाउ टिल दैट पॉइंट दे वर ऑन देयर वे. नाउ इट इज अ काइंड ऑफ डिस्क्रिप्शन. सो दे स्टार्टेड प्रेजिंग द ट्रीज दैट आर अराउंड. और वो किस चीज के ट्रीज हैं, या वो किस तरह से इस्तेमाल होते हैं, या पूरी साल में उनका क्या वो ड्राई होते हैं, नहीं होते हैं, या किस काम के लिए उनकी लकड़ी इस्तेमाल होती है. So this is a kind of little digression from the main point. the laurel mead of majesty conquerors. And poets sage, the fire that weepeth still, and willow worn of forlorn paramours, the obedient to the bender's will. Now again, that description of the trees, of the different types of trees, कि वो किस लिए यूज होते हैं, उनका क्या मकसद है, how they are beneficial for human beings, that continues even here. Laurel जो है वो mighty conquerors के लिए, या poets जो हैं, poets sage के लिए, it is got the fire that weepeth still. So again, the description of the trees continues here, even in these lines. The laurel, mead of mighty conquerors. Mead is the reward, so it is considered to be the reward for the great warriors, for the great soldiers, and poets sage, and it is a reward for the poets also. The fire that weepeth still. And the willow worn of forlorn paramours. Paramour basically refers to the fur that continually gives off, and finally there comes a time when it is all clean. The obedient to the bender's will. So the bowman, this again, the word is obedient. How it is obedient? कि वो जब उन्होंने कमांड बनानी होती है तो वो लकड़ी को जिस तरीके से, जिस शेप में मोड़ना चाहते हैं उसी तरीके से मुड़ जाती है. The birch for shafts, the shallow for the mill, the myrrh sweet bleeding in the bitter wound, the warlike beech, the ash for nothing ill, the fruitful olive and the platane round, the carver home and the maple seldom inward sound. Now again, it continues with that description. So in a number of stanzas, in a number of lines, the poet continues with the description of those trees. So this is digression. The birch of shafts, the sallow for the mill. So it serves as the myrrh sweet bleeding in the bitter wound. So how does it, there are trees that expel gum that is used in the field of medicine for the purposes of cure. So the warlike beech, it is a beech where the war chariots were made. The ash for nothing ill, so for no ill will, for not doing anything bad. The fruitful olive since the olive tree bears the fruit, and the platane round. Platane is the plane tree of broad trunk. बहुत बड़े तने के साथ जो दरख्त होते हैं वो भी useful होते हैं. The carver home, the home suitable for carving. The maple seldom inward sound. There is no sound to be heard. Led with delight. Now in the previous lines what we have discussed, the description of the trees, that what are the different, now names of trees are there, and then for what purpose those trees are used. So this is the digression from the main topic. इसमें जो night है उसकी जो भी exploit है या जो भी उसका adventure है उससे बहुत हट के बात हो रही है. Let with delight they thus beguile the way. So delight is खुशी, इसी calmness में, इसी इत्मीनान में, they beguiled the way, they were deceived and they forgot their way until the blustering storm is overblown. हालांकि यहाँ तक के वो जो storm था वो खत्म हो चुका था, वो जो fierce, unruly, वो जो wild storm था वो खत्म हो चुका था. When weaning to return, जब उन्होंने सोचा कि अब उन्हें वापस मुड़ना चाहिए, whence they did stray, तो वो भटक चुके थे. They cannot find that path which first was shown. अब वो उस रास्ते तक नहीं पहुंच पा रहे थे जहां से वो इस सारी जगह पर एंटर हुए थे. But wandered to and fro in ways unknown. So what they kept on doing, they kept on wandering here and there in those ways, in those paths that were unknown to them. Furthest from end then. So they were far from the end, they were far from the point where they had begun. When the nearest ween, when they thought that they are nearer, that makes them doubt. So they had the fear, their wits be not their own. They thought that they had their wits be not their own, so many paths, so many turnings seen, to which of them to take in diverse doubt they been. So what happened? They forgot their way, they were afraid of the way which one should be taken, and even their minds, it seemed to them that their minds have stopped working. It was not their own mind. So they had so many paths, they had so many turns in front of them, so many roads were there, so many beaten paths were there in front of them. They could not distinguish that which one they had to take. So they were in the state of doubt. They had various doubts about the way. So whatever we talked about some of the important writers of the age. We talked about Sir Philip Sidney, Earl of Leicester, who are important patrons of Edmund Spenser, and they readily acknowledged Edmund Spenser's genius, and they presented him to the Queen. And we started off with the story, and the story revolved around, we had the introduction to a number of characters. A knight was there, he represented holiness. Lady Una, a lamb, and a dwarf was also there. Everything, all these people, there was apparently, it was a story that Lady Una was in trouble. The dragon had taken control of her land, her father's land. So the knight was going to help her, and on their way, when they were going, the knight had Lady Una with him, the dwarf, the lamb, and the vivid description of their characters is given. And initially the poet begins with the invocation to the muse. He seeks help. He says that since he has never written such a type of poetry before, he wanted to take help from muses. So there are lots of references from the Greek and Roman mythology. On the allegorical level, all these characters, they are symbolic. They refer to something that the story has got, the poem has got an underlying message also. The knight represents the holiness, Lady Una represents truth, true religion, the lamb represents the purity. So all these characters, they are representative of something. So far we have completed these stanzas in which they have strayed on their way. They have forgotten their way. They don't know which way to take. So in the next lecture, we'll begin from this very point. Allah Hafiz.